The novel encounter, visualizing the familiar. At about age 6, my twin sister Jennifer and I were liberated to having our own bedrooms, although it took years before we could fall asleep apart. Every night we fell asleep together in our parents' queen-size bed. I slept on my father's side of the bed near the windows which faced the front of the house, and she claimed Mom's side, opposite the vanity dresser and closest to the entrance. The bedspread was primarily brown, a quilted pattern made of a starchy synthetic material, yet comfortably familiar. The headboard was a solid dark wood with a centered mirror and shelves on either side, where miscellaneous objects and maybe a paperback or two sat. Lying in bed, we faced the sliding closet doors where one of us would hide when playing hide and seek. During these years, our parents' bedroom was essentially our bedroom too. I remember the feeling of complete exhaustion and relaxation when being awoken every night when they would carry each of us up the stairs to our own beds, tuck us in and say goodnight with a kiss on the forehead or on the cheek. I know this nightly occurrence lasted for years as this ritual came to a closure when they could no longer carry us. I suppose she and I knew it was inevitable, growing as we were, but the transition was felt as an irretrievable loss. In years to follow, the path we wore between our neighboring bedrooms left an imprint in the carpeting. My current research is deeply informed by such material and spatial memories of home. Important is the role of home as a constructed autobiographical narrative and its links to memory. The connection between memory, home, and narrative are investigated by many artists and philosophers. Psychoanalyst Carl Jung has been influential in addressing home as in itself an autobiographical act and practice. Subsequently, it has become commonplace to interpret houses in dreams, memories, literature, and art as settings for an emerging interior life. The impetus for exploring the architectural metaphor of the psyche springs from a dream Jung had in 1909. In this dream house, he begins on the upper story in a Rococo-style room that displays an inhabited atmosphere. As he descends the various stories, the spaces become sequentially historical, where, at the basement level, Neolithic tools are found. Jung corresponds the journey through the multi-story house as passages to consciousness, personal unconsciousness, and collective unconsciousness. On a personal quest, Jung built, over a 12-year period, a primitive stone dwelling at Bollingen in Switzerland as an effort to delve deeper into the metaphor of the house as an extension of the self. It is appropriate to consider the permanence of the material he used to spatially construct these elusive qualities. Stone achieved for Jung a solid representation of his psyche. The tower, as it became to be called, materializes his dream house and diagrams the self as a structure. Jung's tower demonstrates that home can be a symbol of psychic wholeness and provide unity from perhaps disconnected experience. Framing memory in domestic space is the emphasis of my practice-led investigation, which uses photograms as a structural form that, like Jung, gives substance to memories. The imagery of my work is drawn from my memory of actual domestic spaces. Home and the autobiographical narrative are constructions, built in layers, where possible meanings are configured. These layers can also be applied to the accumulations of memories within interior spaces. Home is a subject to elicit discourse between the real, the remembered, the fiction, and the representation. We enter home in the same way that we enter a novel. Both experiences are bound to a temporal sense of a beginning and an end. Implicit in their process, my photograms are intimate and to be opened like a book, touched and arranged. They are exposed to a natural process of wear through use and age. The imagery of my photograms relies on natural light and are primarily created by layering the photogram models of rooms on top of one another. The cut-out architectural features of windows or doors cast an impression onto the room below. These impressions connect nonlinear series of domestic memories. The homes we inhabit are a sort of photogram. The interior and exterior are constantly subject to light and shadow, which expose and conceal surfaces. These natural conditions reflect the elusive process of transformation, aging, and perception. While constructing these photogram models of rooms I once lived in or have been a guest in, I have discovered dormant memories that have become present. In one body of work, I have photographed the photogram rooms, printed them on paper, and have folded them into iconic furniture found within a particular room. I have been recording the details which emerge exclusive to these spaces, such as the wall-mounted pendulum clock which was a feature in my childhood kitchen and hung decades later in my divorced father's dining room. This object created a link between time and space. The paper furniture gives the memory a place and validates perhaps otherwise insignificant occurrences. Jung's archetypal tower is an exemplary example of giving an awakened inner life a place. Exploring memory with its vital supply of impressions allows us to penetrate through routine representations in order to see the evolving self. Remembrance always begins with where we are in the present, but we soon discover that the beginning can start anywhere. It is fallible and takes us on a meandering path rich with fleeting scenes that we try and harmonize with our current sense of self, a self that contemplates indwelling. Memory combines notions of the intangible sense of place related to authenticity and identity. We remember images, sensations, objects, or effects in a way that matches our own descriptions of our physical relationship to the world. Memory can be viewed as a creation of the self as it is becoming. Paul John Aiken argued that autobiography is a process of self-creation and self-invention. He assumes from the start that autobiographical truth is composed of certain fictions. He asserts that selfhood emerges along with the acquisition of language, and that it is a fictive structure in the narrative. The past revisited is at best a recreation, and inherent in this is the role of artistic expression. What we remember, however closely, can never be re-experienced as we remember it to be. We know that the past no longer exists, yet we are never removed from it, nor do we stop looking for it. Whatever detail or fleeting impression retained is the truth regardless of historical evidence. And according to Richard Coe, not accuracy, but an inner symbolic truth of the unverifiable recollection is where its significance lies. How we tell our stories are intimately connected to memory. Beginning with St. Augustine's Confessions, an appeal to connect with something larger than one's own individual life continues to manifest in the form of autobiography. The way autobiographies are told varies throughout time and cultural context. No life is lived without a trace, and how that trace is recounted has led many critics into theorizing the truth or fiction of autobiography. Notable critic Georges Gustorf established classical autobiographical theory, which focused on autobiography as a genre based on the notion of a pre-existing ontological self. For Gustorf, the literary and artistic function of autobiography was secondary to its anthropological one, thus orienting autobiography as a truth-telling endeavor. Theories of autobiography since the 1970s have focused on its authenticity, raising questions of referentiality, mimesis, and the ontology of the self, as well as the role of cognition, perception, and self-creation. Such psychological and philosophical positions are evident in the work of Aiken, Coe, and James Olney. Olney introduces metaphor as an intermediary between autobiography and the self, with an impulse to order. The house as a metaphor for the self satisfies the desire to establish a sense of order. He invites us to contemplate that we do not see or touch the self, but we do see and touch its metaphors. The advantage of the photogram lies in its reliance on the ephemeral and the tactile to reacquaint us with dimensions of memory and reality, both familiar and hidden. My photogram models allow for touch and to visualize oneself in the miniaturized space, thus initiating a different image of what a room is and how it is experienced. Metaphor enables us to make connections between the known and the unknown, whereby we assign meaning to these relational patterns. For writer Jean Genet, in the act of writing, he is not merely imposing on the past a pattern of his own devising, but actually creating meaning where none existed before. The presentation of personal histories is by no means solely linguistic. A translation of memories can morph into a variety of visual and tangible forms. My photograms and paper sculptures represent a point of entry for recall and dialogue. Transcribing these narratives onto an intimate material and shaping them into three-dimensional form bridges metaphor with autobiography and space. Psychologist Donald Polkinghorne investigates how narratives construct experience as meaningful and describes narratives as providing links, connections, coherence, and sense. Akin to Gestalt principles, pattern emerges from its parts. Narrative meaning is created by noting that something is part of some whole, and that something is the cause of something else. Often subliminal domestic spaces co-create our identities through repetition, thought, emotion, and action. What binds home and identity together is pattern. There is no fixed self, only the habit of looking for one. Likewise, there is no home, only the process of forming one. My practice reflects a process of pattern making. The photogram rooms and furniture paper sculptures are an incomplete story when viewed individually. The accumulation of these sculptural spaces and handwritten narratives provides substance to an autobiographical investigation. The making of these artifacts relies on a symbiotic relationship between the stories of memory and space. When I hold a scalpel in my left hand and carefully cut out the remembered architectural features of a particular room, my bodily memory directs the image. I do not know how the final image will present itself as the paper transforms under the conditions of light, shadow, and in the chemicals in the plastic trays in the darkroom. A reliance on the elusive relationship between the ephemeral qualities of light, memory, and space significantly informs my work. This process of becoming refers back to Jung's manifestation of the psyche in his dwelling. Whereas Jung was deeply connected to the permanence of stone, my paper dwellings refer to the fragility of shaping intangible qualities into form. Critical to my research is the belief that materiality enriches our understanding and facilitates meaning. Artifacts communicate directly because they have the perceived value of presence. A common medium on which to record a value such as history is paper. Paper appropriately links memory to our senses and spatial experience. Paper and memory are inherently familiar, malleable, and tactile, as well vulnerable to loss, neglect, or deterioration. Paper has a 2,000-year history, and light-sensitive paper dates to the late 1830s. Both are intimate and flexible materials that can be used to bring us into direct contact with change. Solace may be found in identifying with and accepting the fragility of material over time. Light-sensitive paper, a delicate combination of gelatin, emulsion, silver nitrate, and salt, embodies transformation. In the darkroom, its alteration is rapid. But once processed, the fixed image becomes, like us, subject to aging, uncertainty, weathering, and physical wear. Exploring analog techniques of light-sensitive image making on paper can introduce a novel approach to the inscription of memories. So why not redirect the photographic moment as a preservation of memory to the memory of photographic paper itself? I have been examining how making sculptural photograms creates a visual autobiography for interaction with memory. The removal of photographed representations of space and situations fosters an atmosphere for subjective engagement that lends itself to the collective story. Bridging ordinary memories from the private sphere into the public domain could contribute to a fundamental change in perceptions of what autobiography is and elicit conversation. Real conversation occurs when you don't know what the other person is going to say next. An abstracted approach to recording memory of domestic space can accentuate memory as an integrative process that involves a tangible experience. It is at the intersection of abstraction and representation where the potential of visualized memory could encourage shifts in how we study culture, psychology, and communicate through art and design.